Good morning, everyone. I'm Cristiano. Once again, we are here in Prague, specifically at Staroměstská náměstí. This is the square of the old town. It is one of the most important in the cities, and there's so many interesting buildings, including, of course, the very famous astronomical clock. But today, what I want to talk about is about the religious history of Czech Republic. It is much more interesting than more people realize. Now, Prague today is a Catholic country, but also with a very large non-spiritual community, a lot of atheists here. Why? Well, there's a deep tradition here in Czech Republic, specifically in this region called Bohemia, about rebellion against the Catholic Church. The church you can see behind me is the Church of Holy Mary of Tim. This is a Hussite church. Now you might ask yourself, what's a Hussite? What is Hus? I'm going to tell you. So, Jan Hus was a Bohemian theologist. He was a very important man, and he still is a very important man for the history of Czech Republic. Jan Hus lived in the 14th century, and 100 years before, the even more famous theologist Martin Luther was saying some similar things. He was talking about things like church should have been poor, the clergy should not have accumulated that much wealth. He also thought that church should not sell indulgences. Indulgences were basically selling your place, your place in heaven by paying money to the church. He thought that it was all corrupted. Also, he believed that Mass should have been sung in local language, so either in Czech, German, and not in Latin, so the common people could understand. And maybe the biggest difference between Jan Hus and all the rest of the Protestants, because Jan Hus is considered a proto-Protestant, was the communion ritual. In the Catholic Church, during the communion ritual, the priest is going to give the followers bread to eat, and then he's going to drink the wine. The bread represents the body of Christ. The wine represents the blood. However, Hussites believe the followers, in order to have communion with Jesus Christ, not only have to eat the bread, but also drink the wine, just like the priest. And that is why, as you can see in the middle of the triangle at the center of the church, there is the golden chalice with bread inside. That was kind of the unofficial symbol of the Hussites. So Jan Hus became really popular here. He actually gathered a lot of followers. However, the Pope didn't appreciate that much, because also the Pope thought there was a danger to his authority. For this reason, Jan Hus was sentenced to death as an heretic. He was burned on a stake and became a martyr. The thing is, after his death, the Hussites decided to basically rebel in a war called the Hussite War. Now, the Hussite War is called this way, but it should be called, I think, the Hussite Revolution rather, because in this event, some followers of Jan Hus decided to kidnap 10 Catholic representatives, draw them on the top of the old town hall in Charles Square, Karlovo náměstí, and threw them from there in the first defenestration of Prague. And from there, a conflict started. And this huge conflict was mostly led from the Hussite side by this general called Žižka. Žižka was a semi-legendary, basically, super strong general, blind from one eye, used to wear an eye patch, and he used to fight the Catholics and win almost every single time. The Hussites, under his command, managed to gain a lot of land from them. However, after Žižka died, the Hussite movement kind of started to split and kind of became more and more divided. So, at one point, some rebels decided to make a compromise. We're gonna make Prague and Bohemia Catholic again. However, Hussites were highly tolerated. So the Hussite phenomenon kinda ended, but from that moment, Bohemians knew they could rebel. Bohemians knew that one day they would have gotten rid of the Catholic Church and maybe even the foreign control. And this is going to happen more and more. For example, in the 30 Years' War, which I'm going to explain later. One last thing I want to say about the Hussite Wars is that the Hussite Church still exists today in a very, very, very small capacity, less than 1% of the global population. But it's not the original one. Basically, the Hussite Church was re-established in the 19th century by one of the main priests of the city who wanted to go back to the traditional roots of Christianity, since they considered the Austro-Hungarian priests to be too liberal. So there is still some very radical Hussites living in Czechia, but it's much more uncommon than before. Okay, so now we moved, but just a little bit. Behind me on my left, I don't know if you can see right now, there's the statue of Jan Hus. Very important, as I said, to the history of religion in Czechia. But what I want to talk about now is about the 30 Years' War. Now, the Hussite War was bloody, was difficult, and was really important to Bohemia. The 30 Years' War was even bloodier, even deadlier, and important to every single country in Europe. It's arguably one of the biggest events ever happened in the history of mankind, and the worst war of religion ever. Now, in order to talk about the 30 Years' War, we need to go a little bit more far ahead in time compared to Jan Hus. Roughly 100 years later, another theology, as I mentioned before, Martin Luther, was starting to say very similar things. And Martin Luther was from the neighboring region of Saxony, like on the border with the Czech Republic, and he was part of Germany. He is part of Germany now. And Martin Luther actually became much more popular than Jan Hus. His influence spread throughout all of Europe. And not just Luther himself, there were a lot of other theologians who had their own version of Protestantism. For example, Calvin, which was very popular in Switzerland and in Netherlands. The thing with Protestants is that they did not believe in the power of the Pope. For this reason, the Pope could not stand them at all. The situation had to be solved. So what happened is that there were a lot of tensions starting to rise in all of Europe. For example, a lot of nobles started to convert as well to Protestantism. For this reason, the Pope started to think, hey, maybe we should discuss this somehow, some way. And specifically in Bohemia and here in Prague, at the castle in the Reciani neighborhood, at the palace of Lobovich family, some Protestant nobles and some Catholic nobles met in order to decide what to do. The thing is, the discussion didn't end well, and the Catholics were took by the jackets and thrown from the window of the palace in the second defenestration of Prague, which is the most famous one. And from that moment, here in Prague, here in Bohemia, the 30 Years' War started. A bloody war that included countries like, as I said, Sweden, Germany, France, Spain, all of them fighting. And there were a lot of phases of the war, but the Bohemian phase of the 30 Years' War ended right here. And when I say right here, I mean literally. You can see there are some crosses behind me. Well, the ruling family at the moment in in Bohemia was the Habsburg. The Habsburg was a family coming from Spain, which was incredibly powerful. At one point, the Habsburg family owned all of Europe, and the Habsburgs were Catholic. So the Habsburgs and their friend from Spain, because Spain was also part of the domain of the Habsburgs, but another branch of the family, came here to Bohemia in order to fight the Protestants at the Battle of the White Mountain. And in the Battle of the White Mountain, the Protestants were once again defeated. The Czech Republic became Catholic once more. However, at this point, people were even more, in a way, reluctant to accept foreign rule, because the end of the war ended on those crosses on which the 27 nobles who organized the rebellion were put to death. And what you might see, if you're really careful, is that there is not 27 crosses there. There's 28. The 28th one was added actually quite recently. And the reason is that another of these nobles decided to commit suicide before he was caught by the Habsburgs. And for this reason, it's still considered one of the martyrs. So in order to complete, they're all like the monument in their honor. Now there's 28. Also, the 28th one, some people say it can represent also Jan Hus as one of the organizers in the Protestant reform in some way. And after the 30 Years' War, Prague became basically part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and it remained as such until 1918, in which Bohemia and Slovakia and Moravia and all of the regions neighboring became one single entity independent called Czechoslovakia, which remained such until 1938.